quedar ahí.
Este es Palm Drive, ¿a dónde nos lleva?
Vamos a doblar izquierda.
Ah.
So, what do you want to talk about?
Okay, at the beginning of Castro,
Mm-hmm.
there were two tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
One, to, how do you say, derrocar?
To like tumble, to take down.
Through the underground and militarily.
Mm-hmm.
But they were too strong.
Mm-hmm.
The other was the theory of democracy. Try to implant democracy while they were trying to implant communism.
Mm-hmm.
So then one idea that came up
Mm-hmm.
was to have I think they started in the ACU. The ACU is very related to the history of Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
Since it started in 1932.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea was initially to put key people
Mm-hmm.
in the, like in Cuba they didn't call Secretary of State or Secretary of Commerce.
Mm-hmm.
It was Ministro de Comercio, Ministro de las Fuerzas Armadas, Ministro de Agricultura, which sounds more official.
Yeah.
Because secretary, like they tell Hillary, Secretary Hillary,
Yeah.
it's confusing.
Yeah.
So there was Ministro. So the idea was to put key people, mainly from the ACU, Belén, religious organizations, to kind of invade the government from within.
Okay.
To try to change communism. By then, Fidel has not said that it was a communist revolution, but you could spell it.
Yeah.
So we got to be about 56 people between Villanova University, ACU, La Salle University. Mainly it was Catholic organizations.
Yeah.
And we were able to get positions within those ministries. So I had the opportunity to work for the Ministry of Commerce.
Yeah.
Then one of my professors of economics at Villanova, he became the director of import and export.
Mm-hmm.
Another friend from the ACU was, but these were people, already professional people.
Mm-hmm.
Another was Oscar Echevarría, que se graduó con Alberto en Belén, que era the director of supply and demand. And those kind of subdivisions within the Ministry of Commerce. So we tried to como invade, to try to implant democracy within the government. And then I started at the Ministry of Commerce, I think in 59, the first year of that. And you believe that of all the jobs that I have had in my life, one that was the most interesting and I was able to implement innovations was there.
Wow.
At the beginning, later, no. Pero I started in the division of statistics. And then my professor promoted me, and I was like 20 years old.
Wow.
Let's see, I left Cuba at 21, so I was also gave me a promotion to be the chief of the export division. Then export was everything that Cuba exported except sugar, tobacco, coffee. Those were 3 different institutions. But all the rest went through my office. So I did a lot of innovations there. And back then, Fidel did away with Congress. There was no Congress, no Senate. So the way he passed laws was similar to Trump here, through executive orders.
Yeah.
But the way they did it was the council of the cabinet together met once a week and then studied the bills that were submitted to them and then became law. The modifications and so forth. But I got to be at that level. Okay.
Yeah.
I wrote draft or legislation, and I used to tell Ellie all the details. One of them se llamaba la ley de la papa, regarding potatoes.
Yeah.
And rules to export potatoes. And then, for instance, I had to coordinate with the Department of Supply and Demand, because if we exported too many potatoes, then the price in the national market will go up.
Interesting.
So we had to balance
between
the national consumption and the export. So it was super interesting.
Yeah.
And I used to tell Ellie all those things. And she was 17, 18, whatever. I could talk with her about those things. And then what I'm trying to get is, it was for me a very complicated life, because here I was working at the Ministry of Commerce, which was a government position. Then I was in the Christian democracy, trying to implement democracy. But when the president of the Christian democracy had problems with the government of Fidel, he had to go into exile. And then the group kind of dissolved. So then at the ACU, a lot of people were already doing counter-revolution in the underground. And the first people to go to the training camps organized by the CIA were a lot of agrupados. And the name of the landing force that landed in Bahia de Cochinos, the number was 2506. And you may see near home, there's a street that says 2506 Brigade. Well, ese muchacho era un agrupado que estaba en los campamentos en Nicaragua. And his jeep went down a hill and he died. So it was the first casualty in the training camp. So in honor of him, they named it La Brigada 2506. But just to show you how complicated things were. So here I was working within the government. I was trying to implement democracy. Then democracy didn't work. And then I was helping in propaganda the underground and the student group that was part of another group, se llama MRR, Movimiento de Recuperación Revolucionaria. And it was a group that had been with Fidel in the mountains, and they realized that the revolution had been treason by Fidel. What he promised for the revolution, he changed it.
Yeah.
And like he had promised free elections, reestablish the constitution, reestablish the Senate and the Congress. Everything he promised wasn't happening. and it started to become a dictatorship.
Yeah.
So at that point, I remember one day I got to Hidalgo after work, and I had a very complicated life because in the morning until 2 o'clock I work at the Ministry of Commerce from 8 to 2. Then from there, sometimes I went to Hidalgo. And then from there to the university to study from 6 or 6:30 to 10.
Wow.
So I really didn't have too much time to study.
Yeah.
And the revolutionary part was gaining momentum. So I was involved in all those things, and like I mentioned to Sophia yesterday, I felt like I was in a centrifuge. You know what a centrifuge is? And you were in the middle of all that. And I remember one day I got to the Aco, and you could see groups of 4 or 5 talking in the big patio. And they were talking about revolution. And one day I felt very bad because I still was with the Christian democracy. And then they asked me very sarcastic, how is the Christian democracy? Like, well, they were already, the word is conspirating.
Conspiring.
I was partially still with the democratic movement. So I felt that was kind of a put down because I was making an effort and they put it down.
Yeah.
So anyhow, when the Christian democracy dissolved, then I started helping the student group. And it was very, very complicated. So here's an interesting part where Ellie comes into the picture. One time we went to the movies, and I remember in the movie there were young boys or young adults trying to climb Mount Everest. You know what Mount Everest, right?
Yes.
And it was very difficult, and they were trying to reach the top, and but I have all those things in my mind. And then all of a sudden comes to my mind, out of the blue sky, like Jesus telling me, if I would call you, would you follow me? And I was in the middle of the movie. And then my answer was, well, you call me, I'll follow you. So then I went to see a priest in Belen that he was, before he became a Jesuit priest, was a psychiatrist.
Interesting.
And he was coaching the people that thought they had vocation to be a Jesuit. So I started visiting him, and he started coaching me, and he made a mistake thinking that I did have vocation. And really I didn't, but he thought so. And he got several people into the novitiate, and let's say out of 12 they came out.
Wow.
Because they didn't have vocation.
Yeah.
They were very idealistic people. They were good Catholics, but that doesn't mean that you have vocation to be a priest.
Yeah.
So, in the middle of all that, the situation started getting tense when they did the search in my house, and my parents knew that I was involved. And my father realized that I was in the border of getting in jail. And he was having a hard time in his work too. And he was also teaching analytical chemistry. And the students were saying, "Oh, you are counter-revolutionary because you are recommending books in English." Well, in chemistry, there were no books in Spanish. So when I referred to books written in English, I said it was counter-revolutionary.
Wow.
So it got to a point that my father said we had to leave. And within a week, we prepared that we were leaving.
How did you get permission to leave?
Well, that's the point. I didn't really have permission to leave the government. I said to my boss that I was going to go to a workshop, a student workshop in the United States. And I'll be back in 2 weeks, something like that. So that day that we left was 14th of November 1960. I went to work, and then about noon, I told the secretary today I had to leave early. I went home. Maria Enriqueta, the mother of Carlos Enrique, was waiting for my mother and I. And my father had left 2 days before, so they wouldn't see that it was a family living together. So
How did you guys get the permission from the government to leave? Not
it
from
wasn't
you?
a permission; it was like a leave of absence for
like
2 weeks.
like it was just a tourist visa kind of thing.
Well, I had a tourist visa,
Okay.
but it was supposed to be to a student's workshop.
Okay.
So from there, Maria Enriqueta, the mother of Carlos, drove my mom and I to the airport, and we left. But then once I got inside the airplane, the Pan American that had the ticket, I was nervous because in the belly of the plane were exports from Cuba going to the United States, and all the permits were signed by me. So I thought, if they find out that Manuel Hidalgo is a passenger and he's the one that signed all those documents,
Oh my goodness.
I could be taken straight to jail.
Yeah.
So until the airplane was in the air, like in international waters, then I felt safe. Up to that moment, sometimes they made the plane come back, detain that person, and then the plane left again.
Wow.
So it was a very complicated thing. Okay, then back to Ellie into the picture. About 2 or 3 weeks before leaving Cuba, when my father, mother, and I decided that yes, we had to leave, I kept being coached by that father superior that was coaching the people that could have vocation.
Yeah.
And he painted it like very rosy.
Yeah.
Like, I remember he telling me, well, as you advance in your studies and philosophy and theology, perhaps you could go to Germany to specialize in economics. So he painted it very interesting, no? So anyhow, like 3 or 4 days before leaving Cuba, I went to visit Ellie. And we were...
Did she know that you were leaving?
No, now it comes.
Okay, sorry.
We were not novios, but I was just going out with her and she was going out with me. So neither one was dating anybody else. So technically we were novios, but we have not officially.
Yeah.
But we had that communication and a great confidence in each other. So one evening I went to see her after the university. And just to show you how tense we're getting, that let's say my class in economics, we were 25 people. And then all of a sudden people started leaving the United States.
Wow.
And everybody was afraid to tell a classmate I'm leaving. So all of a sudden out of the 25, 5 would disappear.
Wow.
The next weekend, 8 would disappear. And then the class was becoming smaller and smaller. And we all knew that they were coming with the South.
Yeah.
But nobody was telling the others. So then one night I went to visit Ellie, and it was very hard for me when I told her, well, Ellie, I have to leave Cuba. She knows the reason that I could be detained and all that. But also, I'm discerning. You know what the word discerning is, right? It was not a decision, it was discerning if I have vocation. And then she was kind of shocked because here she was very much in love with me and I was very much in love with her. And all of a sudden your novio said I may enter the prison.
Oh my goodness.
So.
Had you told her that you loved her yet?
Well, it was evident.
But you hadn't said I love you yet?
No.
Okay.
But it was evident.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know how he handled it. It must have been so hard.
And did she think she was gonna leave Cuba or no?
Eventually, yeah.
But did she think that at that moment, was she like, oh, I'll